Now, once you've done the tailoring of the process, then you get onto project scope management. Under each of these knowledge areas, you will find various assessments. As a part of these knowledge areas, talking about scope management, we start with plan scope management. This is where we largely focus on how to plan the scope management activities on a project. Collecting requirements is definitely one of the important processes where we reach out to the stakeholders to identify their needs and requirements based on the project or product that we are working on. Then, based on the requirements that we have gathered, we define scope and ensure that whatever is defined in the scope is what we work on and not something which is not part of it. Creating the WBS process certainly gives us an idea about the low-level activities, task packages, and work packages that we have to work upon. Decomposition is one of the techniques that is used while creating WBS. So the creation of WBS is definitely one of the important processes within scope management. Then, we have to validate the scope against the acceptance criteria that is defined between you and the customer for each deliverable that you're producing by the end of each phase in the project or product life cycle. It's important to define very clearly the acceptance criteria. Lastly, we have scope control, where we see how to effectively control changes that might happen to the scope and how to manage those changes. These are the 6 processes that we have within scope management. Let's get into each of these and do a deep dive into them. These processes help us understand the inputs we must consider, the tools and techniques we can use, and the expected outputs. So let's start with the first one, which is plan scope management. As the name suggests, plan scope management is all about defining our approach to managing the scope of a project. It's largely about defining how we will determine the product scope, validate it against the acceptance criteria, control the scope, and manage changes to it. All of these approaches are covered as a part of the scope management plan. This is an important document from the perspective of resolving any confusion about managing changes. If I am new to a project and unsure how to handle scope validation, I can refer to this document. It provides guidance and direction on the overall approach agreed upon between the team and the customer. Now, how do we create this document? For that, we must refer to certain inputs. The first is, of course, the project charter. Since we are defining the approach, it's important to refer to the project charter to understand the high-level scope mentioned there. We also need to refer to the project management plan, which is a subsidiary management plan encompassing various plans, such as the quality management plan. The quality management plan provides input on the standards we need to follow while working on the product, service, or result of the project. The project life cycle or development approach that has been agreed upon is also taken into account. Organizational process assets help us understand the internal standards we need to follow and the templates we should refer to. Enterprise environmental factors, such as internal and external influences, also play a role. For example, if we are building CRM sales management software, we would also look at market products to identify gaps between what is available and what we need to build. These market factors impact the overall scope management plan. Once we have a plan in place, we need to use specific tools and techniques to create it. The first is expert judgment, where we consult experienced professionals. Meetings can be organized to engage the right stakeholders and gather data. These techniques help ensure a comprehensive scope management plan. By the end of the scope management planning process, we obtain the scope management plan as an output. This plan helps us understand how the project scope will be managed. Additionally, we get a requirements management plan, which outlines how requirements will be managed, the tools and techniques to be used, and the stakeholders involved. Collect requirements as a part of the collect requirements process. What do I have to do? So this is a process where we basically ensure that we gather all the needs and requirements of customers, which will help in meeting the objectives of the project that we are working on. So it could be manufacturing some product that you are working on or coming up with some result, process, or service that you're trying to launch in the market. All of that could be a part of the collect requirements process, depending on the kind of objective that you have defined. This will certainly give us an idea about how to define the scope of the product or project that we are working on. Before we define the scope, it's important to gather requirements. In order to do that, we'll have to use certain tools and techniques. We have to refer to certain artifacts which are already created on the project by this time. So let's get on to it. What kind of tools and techniques should we be using? Before we get on to the tools and techniques, first of all, we need to refer to certain artifacts, which I was just mentioning to you. For example, the project charter will help us in understanding the high-level scope of the project. Of course, I would also need to know who some of the stakeholders are that I need to reach out to. The project management plan, largely, includes the scope management plan, requirements management plan, and stakeholder engagement plan. Some of these plans would definitely be useful to me while working on gathering requirements. I would also need to refer to certain project documents, such as the assumption log or lessons learned. If there are any lessons previously learned, I would want to ensure that those mistakes wouldn't be repeated. That's very important. I would also need the stakeholder register, which is very important because it will give me the list of stakeholders I need to engage with. I would also need to refer to business documents, and one of the most important documents would be the business case. The business case will help me understand the background, context, and how this project is going to benefit my customers. It also provides information about investment, impacts, and other relevant aspects. Most of the time, there is vendor engagement on the project in some capacity. I would need to review the agreements, as they will give me an idea of the scope, impact on this project and the kind of contribution the vendor would have. Stakeholders, enterprise environmental factors, and organizational process assets would also be considered while collecting requirements. What kind of templates do I need to use? And what kind of techniques do I need to use? All of that would come into play when working on collecting requirements. These are some of the inputs that I would need to refer to. Now, what kind of tools and techniques would help me when I start gathering requirements on the project? One important tool is expert judgment. I would reach out to people who have done this in the past. I would talk to them, try to understand their perspectives and learnings, and engage them in order to gather scope. For example, a business analyst would be one of the best examples. We have people who have been working in business analysis for a few years, and they know how to conduct certain workshops, facilitate group discussions, and conduct surveys or interviews. I would reach out to them to gather data. There are various ways to do that. One way could be brainstorming sessions. I would conduct face-to-face interviews, and another approach could be benchmarking. For example, if I am working on a CRM software for sales management, I would benchmark it against a well-known and reputable product in the market. Then, I would try to identify gaps, which would help in analyzing the data and gathering more insights. Decision-making is definitely one of the important tools that we use. There could be small techniques within decision-making, such as a simple voting technique to ensure that everybody is engaged and involved. There could also be multi-criteria decision analysis, which considers various criteria such as cost, quality, and resource availability, and how those factors impact the decision. Many of these criteria would be available for reference while making decisions. Team skills and interpersonal skills are also important. For example, do we have the necessary skills in the team to conduct workshops, such as the nominal group technique, observations, and conversations with senior personnel? Do we have facilitation skills within our team members to conduct facilitated workshops? All of these factors certainly have an impact. Data representation techniques, such as affinity diagrams, context diagrams, and prototypes, could also be useful. These techniques will definitely help in engaging stakeholders from whom we will be gathering data and requirements for the project. Alright, so what do we get by the end of the collect requirements process? As an output, you will get requirements documentation. The requirements documentation would follow the template used in your organization. You will also have a requirements traceability matrix. These are the two key outputs that we can expect from this process. The requirements documentation captures all the requirements, and the traceability matrix ensures that they are properly tracked. Let's move on to defining scope. This is done once we have defined the requirements or scope management plan. Once we've gathered requirements, then based on them, we have to define scope. So how do we do that? And what happens largely as part of this process? As part of defining scope, you will see that we are essentially describing what we are going to build, what we are going to create as part of this project and product. Whatever the product outcome or result that you are trying to achieve, you will now define it together with stakeholders. You will need to be on the same page about what it is. This is also where you capture what is in scope, how scope items are defined as part of this project, and what is not part of the project. For example, if you are producing some software that supports only one language, which is English, then this needs to be explicitly mentioned. If it supports two languages, that must also be explicitly stated, and it should be clear that it does not support any languages beyond those agreed upon. The customer acceptance criteria for each deliverable produced at the end of each phase must also be explicitly captured. For example, when discussing acceptance criteria, if a requirement specification document is one of the deliverables, there must be agreed upon acceptance criteria. It must be clear when the document will be signed off and what conditions it must meet to be considered complete. These criteria need to be explicitly documented as part of defining scope. So what do we use as input for the scope definition process? We refer to the project charter, project management plan, certain documents, enterprise environmental factors, and organizational process assets. In terms of the project management plan, we specifically refer to the scope management plan. Regarding certain project documents, we look at assumption logs. If any assumptions exist regarding scope definition, they must be explicitly mentioned. This helps us, and we can also refer to requirements documentation, risk registers, and similar documents as they are useful references during this process. What tools and techniques can we use? Expert judgment is one such technique that is used in most project management processes. It is very useful. We can also use decision-making techniques such as multi-criteria decision analysis and data analysis to determine the best possible options. Alternative analysis and interpersonal and team skills are also critical. Facilitation skills play a key role. If you are running a meeting, these skills are necessary to ensure success. Product analysis is another essential aspect, as it helps determine what is in scope and what is out of scope for the product we are building. By the end of this process, we should have a project scope statement. This statement will define the project or product we are working on and clarify what we want to achieve or build. Certain project documents will also be updated. For example, if any assumptions arise while defining the scope, they should be logged. Requirement documentation should be updated in case of any changes. The requirements traceability matrix should also be updated because, at this stage, all requirements have been identified and need to be documented. If there is an impact, stakeholder registers should also be updated based on interactions with stakeholders. Now that we have defined the scope management plan, gathered requirements, and created a scope for the product or project, it's time to break that down into smaller packages. This breakdown makes it easier to work with, which is part of the work breakdown structure, WBS. WBS is crucial in project management. By breaking down the work into manageable components, it becomes easier to estimate, plan, and execute. Most importantly, WBS helps identify dependencies, create schedules, and estimate costs and resources. Each work package created must be broken down to a level where it is easy to estimate. It should not be a large chunk of requirements but rather small, manageable components. For example, if you are working on hardware, it should be broken down into smaller components and deliverables, making it easier to estimate networking requirements, hardware requirements, server needs, and middleware necessary for building the system. These details must be clearly defined, as well as enterprise environmental factors and the OPA, or organizational process assets. Like, for example, when we create a WBS, there are various ways of creating a WBS. You can use a phased approach, dividing your entire project into various phases. You can go on, for example, with the requirement phase, the design phase, and the development phase. Within each of these phases, you try to break down your scope items into smaller, more manageable packages. If it is a requirement, then you would basically determine how you are going to manage your requirements and create a requirements specification document. That is one of the deliverables. How are you going to collect requirements? What are the various techniques used for each of these? You try to define these deliverables as small as possible so they can later be assigned to people in the form of tasks. Obviously, this will also be useful when estimating things as well. What kind of tools and techniques can be used? When it comes to creating a WBS, there are a couple of things that we can do. The most important technique here is decomposition. As the name suggests, decomposition is all about breaking down larger requirements into smaller ones. Whatever scope item you are working on, try to break it into smaller pieces, which we call work packages. A work package is small enough to be completed within approximately 40 hours or so. That is the rule of 40 that is often followed, but it could vary, ranging from 40 to 80 hours, something that we can estimate and easily track. This also helps in providing inputs when estimating the schedule and budget. Expert judgment is another approach. We can engage subject matter experts, SMEs, to get their views. By the end of this process, we obtain a scope baseline and an updated set of project documents. The scope baseline is particularly important because it defines and solidifies the project scope. We use various tools for project management, such as Microsoft Project or Clarity, but some teams might also use Excel spreadsheets. Once the scope is baselined, any changes beyond that are considered new requirements and must go through the change control board or the agreed-upon change management process between you and the customer. Project documents, such as the assumption log and stakeholder list, will also be updated as a result of this process. To quickly summarize, we started with the scope management plan, defined it, and created it. We determined the approach for managing scope. We discussed how to collect requirements, what inputs to refer to, and which tools and techniques to use. We defined the project scope, establishing a scope baseline and traceability matrix. All this information will be essential for the next process, validating the scope. Validating scope ensures that the deliverables meet acceptance criteria. This is part of the acceptance process, which increases the likelihood of final product, service, or result acceptance. The acceptance process is clearly defined between you and the customer for each deliverable. For example, if you are producing a high-level design document, the acceptance criteria should define when the customer will approve it, allowing you to proceed to the low-level design document, especially in a waterfall methodology. For validating scope, the following inputs are critical. Project management plan, especially the scope management plan and scope baseline. Project documents, such as lessons learned, quality reports, requirement documentation, and traceability matrix. Verified deliverables, those that have been produced and verified. Work performance data, which includes the actual progress of work and is usually captured in project management tools like MS Project or Clarity. Regarding tools and techniques for validating scope, inspection is a key method. You inspect the deliverables against the customer's acceptance criteria. If the acceptance criteria are met, the deliverable is considered approved. What kind of tools and techniques can be used here, especially in validating scope? You would have a few things, a couple of things at least, that you can use when it's about inspection. So you are actually inspecting that, okay, there are certain acceptance criteria that are given by the customer, and I have already produced a deliverable. So, does it really meet the acceptance criteria or not? So, I'm doing these regular inspections, which will actually help me in getting closer and closer to the acceptance criteria of the deliverable that I'm producing. And obviously, decision-making techniques would certainly help in terms of getting opinions from people as well. What do I get out of this? I would get the accepted deliverable by the end of this process. I would know whether my customers have already accepted it, considering that this meets acceptance criteria or not. Work performance information. So, work performance information will be one of the outputs, as I mentioned. It will come from the tool if there is any change at all during the review, during the inspection. Typically, what happens is you're showing the deliverable to the customer, and you're trying to show that it meets acceptance criteria, but there could be changes. They could be like, based on what you have shown to the customer might just suggest a few changes. So, that might be a part of a change request, which will follow the change request cycle, and certain project documents will get updated, like the lessons learned document or the requirements document. Or even, for that matter, the requirement traceability document would also get updated if required. So, this is what we can expect out of the validate scope process. So, now that we have done this, like we've come up with a plan, we have gathered requirements, we've defined the scope, and we also validated requirements. It's important now for us to control that so that scope creep can be avoided. Scope creep avoidance is very important, and that's where the project manager's role comes into the picture, ensuring that the scope is defined so well that there is no need, or scope creep doesn't happen. So let's talk about the last and the most important process, which is about control scope. As part of control scope, we will look into, first of all, what it really is. This comes as part of the monitoring process, and this is where we try to monitor the status of the project and product scope. Whatever the changes are, they need to be incorporated into the scope baseline, which is maintained throughout the project. As we discussed already, once we have defined the scope, we have to also come up with the scope baseline, right? So once it is baseline, once it is agreed upon, if there is any change, it has to go through a change process. That's the part of your control scope and monitoring. What kind of inputs do I need to refer to for this? I would need, of course, the project management plan. I would need project documents, work performance data, and OPIs. All of these we have already discussed earlier as well. For example, in this case, project documents like the lessons learned documents, which will be very useful to me. That's all the tools and techniques which will be useful, like data analysis. I would do the trend analysis. For example, I would also be able to do the alternative analysis, etc. Based on that, what I will get as part of the control scope is the work performance. So, work performance is where I will come to know about the progress we are making on the project. Is it in line with what I have planned, or am I behind the schedule or ahead of the schedule? Or how am I doing? Since we are talking about scope, how am I doing with respect to the scope change requests? If there is any new change that the customer would like to introduce, that will definitely be the output, which will go to the process where the change is going to be processed. The project management plan will get updated, if required. Project documents might get updated, stakeholder register, or, for that matter, assumption log, traceability matrix. So, any of these documents, wherever there is impact as a result of the control scope process, would need to be updated. This covers all the processes that we have to cover as part of the project scope management.